Welcome in, everybody. Thank you for choosing to spend some time with me during this time. This was kind of last minute. I did not. I wasn't planning on doing a video today. I definitely wasn't planning on doing a live, but I had these notes that I had been working on because one of the biggest questions that I get, and it's something that I'm actually always really passionate about answering, is when people ask me about my deconstruction journey. How did you process this, and how did you rebuild yourself, especially coming from the pulpit and now being literally on the other side of that spectrum? I see y'all in the chat. Welcome in, and the chats are on the screen, so I'll try to engage as much as I can. I'm going to do a little bit of talking at the beginning, and then I'll kind of pull back and lean in on the screen, and y'all will see how bad my vision is, so I can read these chats. But I get that question a lot, and it's actually one of the things that I'm most passionate about talking about. It's probably one of the things that I'm most passionate about. I could probably have this conversation 25 to 50 million different ways, just because it's a hot button for me. Yes, what led me to deconstruct? But then also, how did I handle that deconstruction? Especially since for me, it was literally losing everything. I think you saw the name of the video. I lost everything. At least that's how I definitely described it when I was going through it, and that's what it felt like. It felt like I had absolutely lost, or that I was losing everything. But what I actually found was myself, and realized that all those other things that I was holding on to were actually just illusions anyway. It was very much like coming out of the cave. You know what I'm saying? So I want to share some of those notes, and I want to share with you from those notes, and hopefully pull something from this that we can have that creates some conversation on the inside of you. And for those of you who are out there who are still trying to figure out who I am after belief, I hope this conversation kind of helps you find your way. Now, listen, I am not anybody's prototype, so my journey will likely not mirror your journey, and what I needed to do may not likely be what you will need to do for your life. But you can use it as a great point of reference to know that somebody can, and if somebody can, then I can too. Mine just doesn't have to look like theirs. So let's kind of jump into this a little bit. I lost everything, not in the metaphorical, look at how far I've come kind of way. I mean, everything I had spent 2 decades building, gone almost overnight, in an instant. My reputation, my purpose, my community, my God. I was a pastor. I was trusted. I believed that I was doing something divine until I realized that I was just parroting propaganda in a system designed to numb people into silence. And once I started questioning the foundation, the whole house came down. But here's what nobody tells you about deconstruction. It's not just about pulling threads from old beliefs. It's about rebuilding a life that actually makes sense to you. By the time I was in full deconversion mode, God wasn't even the point anymore. The point was, why was I pretending this was ever working in the first place? Today, I'm not necessarily here to debate theology. I'm here to talk about what happens after the collapse, when faith is gone, but your life is still calling. This is my story of moving from pulpits to purpose, from gospel to grit, from being told what to believe to becoming a disruptor in a world desperate for honesty and authenticity. So if you've ever asked who I am without belief, this conversation might be one worth checking out. So let's kind of talk about this. I want to start with 2012 to 2014. I realized this year that I've not talked as much about my deconversion journey, because my entrance into this space was basically interviews. I did at the beginning of last year, I did really a whole bunch of back-to-back interviews with a lot of great people. Stacy and Dee, interview with Harmonic Atheist, Neil 604, and spent a lot of time talking about my story, how I deconverted, how I walked through it. I think the last time I was on Myth Vision, shared my story. So I've spent a lot of time in the past talking about it, but I realized this year I hadn't really given much thought to it, and we've grown so much. So we do have a lot of new subscribers who may not have seen those interviews. So I'm going to share a very high level overview of what that looked like for me. And I may come back and do something on my own channel where I actually tell the whole story. But as of now, you can check it out. Literally just type my name in YouTube and interview, and you'll find my story. But I want to start with 2012, 2014, because 2014 is when I officially deconverted. It's where I walked away from the pulpit, walked away from my church. At that moment, actually, I don't think I've shared this with anybody else. It's in my book, I believe, Black Non-Believer Next Door. Yep, it is. My wife at that time, I left her in charge of the church. But I had really been in deconstruction mode, or at least intentional deconstruction mode since 2012. And for me, what that revolved around is something that I call the problem of propaganda and pseudo intelligence. The church wasn't being helpful because it was separated by doctrine and theology from actually being helpful, and that's what I was wrestling with, because at the time I was completing my degree in social science, which was my first secular degree. And so I was being exposed to a lot of concepts that were giving me tools, language, and permission to interrogate and investigate really my own skepticism in a lot of ways. I began to realize that religions teach people to prioritize propaganda over probability. And so even when we were doing things that seemed helpful, that I indeed absolutely felt were helpful, the reason I felt these things were helpful is because the propaganda said they're helpful. But I have shared this story before on my channel a few times in our Sunday sessions. There was a point in 2012 where my church in the city, which was at the time the fastest growing church in the city, and we weren't a very large church yet, but we were just the fastest growing, and we would do all types of outreach things, and so we did a gas giveaway where we basically we went to the gas station and we said, hey, we're paying for gas for people today for this time block. So whoever pulls up, we're covering their gas. And then we'd have our members out there and we'd wash their windows while we're pumping their gas. So we didn't just pay for it. We paid it, we pumped it, and we washed their windows. And it was, in my mind as a pastor, it was, this is how we're making a difference. We're making a difference. But, and if that was like, I could reframe that now and say, we're just helping people feel special. I'm fine with that. That's fine, because that's accurate. But we're actually making a difference. I felt like we were up until this pivotal moment for me. There was an older lady there whose car had run out of gas while she was waiting in line to get her car to get some free gas. And so we the men in my church pushed her car up to the tank, pumped her gas, and washed her windows. And she gets out of the car, and I mean, she is bawling in tears. And she was like, I did not know how I was gonna make it this week. Thank y'all so much. And for a pastor, that's like one of the most, especially for an outreach-based pastor, that was like one of the most beautiful compliments I had ever gotten. But because I was finishing my first secular degree at the time, and it was in social science, business administration, management, and leadership. Yes, I was a dual major type of guy. Told you I'm hyperproductive. So I couldn't feel good about that. I couldn't feel good that this lady, didn't even have enough gas money to make it, to wherever she needed to go, that she doesn't have that type of familial support or city support. And so while, yes, it was beautiful that my church was able to step in and meet a need, at that mind, I started realizing, but did we meet a need? Like that's, because the thing that I had to sit with is, holy shit, she's going to need gas next week, And even though we framed it like, oh man, we're doing this big thing. And again, if we're just doing it to make people feel human, then yes, I love that. But the propaganda was, that we are changing people's lives, that we just, we just did something incredibly significant. And unfortunately, what I begin to wrestle with is I don't even think we're thinking deep enough about what we're doing. This is what I was wrestling with in 2012, that I don't think we're wrestling deep enough with what we're doing to know if we're actually helping, or to know what could be helpful, or to know how to best help. We're actually just picking what sounds good and just doing that. This creates a breeding ground for pseudo intelligence, where otherwise bright minds offer religious speculation as divine revelation in the absence of sincere investigation. So the problems that as a pastor with great intentions that I signed up to solve, I did not equally sign up to investigate, which becomes that's, oh man, in an environment outside of propaganda, you'd immediately recognize the flaw. You can't fix a problem that you can't diagnose. If you haven't actually investigated, like what's contributing to homelessness, what's contributing to people not having enough food, what's contributing to people not having enough gas. If you're not leading with those questions, you have to ask yourself, am I actually trying to solve a problem, or am I just trying to get attention? And that's what I was sitting with at that moment, because I realized that the only person who won that day was me. And the propaganda setup was so good that we had convinced these people that this was a victory for them, you know? And while it was a wonderful accomplishment of humans working together and using collective economics to do something, we never actually went into it to do something. The question wasn't, how do we solve the problem? The question was, how do we attract a big enough audience to get new people to come on Easter Sunday? Because guess what we're all wearing on this Saturday at the pump? Our Refresh Easter, because that was the series I was doing. Refresh Everything Fresh. Ty Tribbett had an album out called Refresh, and so I was working that angle. I'm a marketer. Don't hate me for it. When I left the church, I became unapologetic about that shit. I was like, oh no, I ain't got to pretend it's the Spirit of God. But no, we had the shirts on with the Refresh. We had the little goodie bags, giving everybody the little invite cards. We'll see you tomorrow at Kingdom Central. And so I'm really wrestling with that. I'm having to wrestle with, Darante, I know you want to feel good, but the truth of the matter is, based on what you know, bruh, you know that the motivation isn't actually to help people. Because if this is you trying to help, this is extremely shallow, and you're not that shallow. So I allowed myself to sit into that like, man, if I'm going to really try to help, then I need to actually get a better understanding of the problem. And what became so scary about that for me, as a person who actually does want to make a difference, is I realized how easy it is to convince people that you're helping when you're not. That was profoundly scary to me. But it was like a wake-up call that I needed, because I know for years, when I was a child, I thought a certain way. And I was pretty clear on that. But then I got saved, and I began to soften that so much. So I'm just getting back to myself. Again, I lost everything, but on the other side of it, man, I found myself. The propaganda of revelation has completely undermined the church's ability to hold itself accountable to measurable and sustainable outcomes. That's what I was wrestling with, is like, we have 1,000,001 ways to say we won when we didn't. We have 1,000,001 ways to say it worked when it didn't. We have 1,000,001 ways to say God showed up when he didn't. If that's your worldview, then you're always going to be calling failure success. And so you're not measuring your impact by outcomes. You're measuring your impact by how you feel about it. And that type of pseudo intelligence has become so prevalent, especially in this country. And I started realizing that as a pastor, that has become so prevalent even in the motivational spaces, the coach spaces, the consulting spaces. We've reduced doing good to feeling good, instead of understanding that the purpose of doing good is empowering us all to do better. You know, like we rightfully felt that the truest motivation to help somebody is to do it because it's going to make you feel good in your heart. That's a shallow ass motivation to help somebody. You know, number one, it's because it's superstitious. If you're feeling something in your heart, those might be palpitations, and you might need to get that shit checked out. Which means if it's superstitious, you can't even measure your involvement in it. It's gonna make your heart feel better. What? Are we talking about cholesterol? No. Help, in my mind, and y'all know I'm pragmatic, and of course I tell everybody in the conversations that we have, I'm not saying this to say this is how you need to be. I'm saying this to say this is how I am. And what I am modeling is just authentic honesty, being honest about myself. And if you're ever in a conversation with me, if you model your authentic honesty and it's something that I disagree with, you know what would be really interesting? You know what you're going to find out? Is that I'm probably not even going to beat you up about it. You know what I'm saying? Oh, this is good. Okay, I'm sorry. So the point is, I realized, like, no, if we can just say, even though this feeding program has not done anything to change outcomes, we can just say, well, as long as just one was fed, then we did our jobs. At this moment, then we're no longer measuring for impact. Now, please do not get this twisted. I am not saying I was getting to the place of saying we shouldn't be doing these things. I was getting to the place of realizing we should be doing so much more. And we actually could be, but we're not even asking the right questions to know how to solve the problem, because we've locked ourselves into an echo chamber of propaganda and pseudo intelligence. So even if somebody calls out the problem, we know we've deprived ourselves of the tools to solve it. You know, we were claiming victories that didn't exist and literally teaching histories that never happened. And that wrestle has started a little earlier than 2012, as a matter of fact. It started when I think it was when Obama was running the second time. Oh, I got to get these years right. Yeah, I think it was the second time. Yeah, second time. When Barack Obama was running for president the second time, I was still highly involved with many of the charismatic evangelical churches. I pivoted like in 2010, I think, maybe 2010, yeah, around that time, to more urban type of churches, still charismatic, but they were more centered on cultural identity, which is something I hadn't been a part of since I had got saved and left the holiness churches. But the non-denominational movement allowed for that kind of burst to happen. But anyway, I was visiting these churches, and one of them was a fairly large church in my city, and a very, very popular apostle in the New Apostolic Reformation movement was coming to speak. And I visited, and typically I had always enjoyed this person's conversations, if you will. But that night I was sitting there, and of course it was politically charged because it was during this time. And he was making all of these bold claims about things that our Muslim president, is how he was putting it, was doing, and was changing the White House into, you know, whatever and all this stuff. And I mean, he was throwing out some pretty specific stuff. And at first, I was almost bought in, like, no, I cannot believe this. Why would he do that? And then I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. I remember sitting in the church thinking these thoughts through, and I'm like, I think I'm only mad about this because of the way it's being emotionally primed. And then when I thought about the way it was being emotionally primed, I said, half of the stuff that he's saying sounds like red flags to me. And so I did something. I picked up a little habit back then, picked up a little habit. I said, let me Google this. Let me Google these claims that this guy is making, you know? And literally everything he was saying, that he has these 800 people in this room just on the edge of their seats buying it. This is what they're accepting as reality. In their mind, this man is telling them the gospel truth because in their minds, this is a preacher. He's a voice of the Lord. Why would he lie about these things? You know? And a person who ever asks, why would a preacher lie? Doesn't understand Christianity at all. It's all a lie. The early church fathers understood that. They just thought it was a useful lie. Okay, sorry. But was able to fact check that, oh my goodness, this man is literally up here. He's either blatantly lying or he's been blatantly lied to and did not exercise his due diligence to verify that information. But either way, this is incredibly irresponsible that we're not holding our preachers to the same standards that we used to hold journalists to. And yes, I have to say used to hold because we don't do that anymore, you know? But they're supposed to be standards. And I was horrified, you know? I was horrified. And so I realized, like, no, there are plenty of pastors who are literally just making shit up. Literally, just to push their agenda. Back during Columbine, when the Columbine shooting happened, there was a story that was made up and was circulated around many evangelical and fundamental churches about this girl named Cassie who refused to renounce Jesus. And almost everybody who heard the story believed it. You know why? Because that's what you've been robbed of. Not just the right to ask questions, but the instinct to. That's where skepticism comes in. Someone makes a claim. The first thought in your mind should be, but why should I believe that? You know, I started realizing that nobody should ever be offended if I don't believe them about something, especially if I don't know you. I know nothing about you. And even if I knew you, me believing it just because you said it is highly fallacious. You know? So, but that's the environment that's created. The one thing that it kept me in the faith so long, in spite of all the trauma I experienced, and man, you get pastors together and you will find about how traumatic it is trying to lead an organization where 100% of the people, including yourself, believe in bullshit. It's a mind fuck, you know. Oh, by the way, for those of you who don't know, if you're just used to my videos, I cuss a lot. I don't believe in magical words, and I actually do get offended when people ask me not to cuss or anything like that, because I'm like, you can just go watch somebody else, like, or just watch my videos where I don't cuss. So, but for those of you, I do try to make that announcement because it takes people by surprise sometimes. But one of the things that it really kept me in the faith for so long was that I sincerely believed that the work that I was doing was having a profound and positive impact on people. And that's because that's how the propaganda works, right? Church members are primed to say things like, oh, God used you today, or that word was exactly what I needed to hear. Or, Pastor, if I didn't come in here today, I don't know if I could have made it. And all of these things sound really good, but in most cases, they're just parroting the script and have no real internal connection or critique to those words. It's like, I used to call it the hallelujah syndrome, where 99% of the people who use the word hallelujah don't know the definition of it, have never looked up the definition of it. They don't know the meaning, don't understand the meaning. It's a word that they just started using because that's how the propaganda works. You're sitting in church one day, and in this case, I'm not just trying to make it evil propaganda. I'm really just trying to help us get more insight onto how we do things. We're the problem, right? But you go to church, you're there for a while. Let's say you've never been to church before. You didn't grow up in a church home, but you're going to give church a try, give Jesus a try. You go to church, and even if you don't even believe it, but you decide, oh, I kind of like this environment. I like being here. I like the people. They're nice. And man, they have some good fried chicken or cookies. I think churches do cookies now. And maybe they bring you some banana bread after you visit the first time. So you're like, oh shit, they is really nice. And so you're like, I might hang out. I don't even believe this, but the message sometimes is kind of positive. So I will come back. And so you come back and you've never used any of these religious words before, but you hear these other people using these words, especially in the black church. You're going to hear somebody saying, hallelujah, preach, bishop, walk, prophet, amen. And you're going to take the ones that you hear the most of. This is typically what you're going to do. You're going to take the ones that you hear the most of, the ones that seem to be used by people regardless of their hierarchy, of their position in the church, and you're going to do it. And so the words that people typically gravitate to are amen and hallelujah. And just the next time you're around a believer, and they, you just hear them say, man, hallelujah, thank God. And just ask, don't attack, just ask. I'm so glad you said that. I've been curious my whole life. Since I heard you use it, can you please tell me what that word means? And watch the cognitive dissonance visibly just crash their whole face. You might have to pick their jaw up for them after that, because they might, if they're honest and if they have some sense of self-awareness, they might come to the realization for the first time in their life that, oh shit, I never even asked that question. That's how easy it is to repeat bullshit. You see how I circled that back around? That's how easy it is to repeat bullshit. One of the things that I had to learn as a pastor is that a lot of times I think things are working for the same reason my members think things are working. It's because we're parroting the same bullshit. But that's not how you determine if something is working. You determine if something is working by verifying the outcomes. What are our success measures? How do we know this was successful? So when someone says, Pastor, I don't know if I could have made it without that word. As a pastor, I'm going to feel like this reaffirms that, okay, yeah, this is obviously helpful. They wouldn't say that it's helpful if it's not helpful, right? Wrong. That's it's weird for me, even when people in secular communities try to suggest that no, because believers say they are happier, it must really be the case. No, we know too much about different things, psychology, sociology. We know about Stockholm syndrome. We know too much to know that no, if you suspect that indoctrination is involved, then no, you have to kind of take what they say about it with a grain of salt, especially if you know that this is a type of indoctrination that attacks critical inquiry. And that's what I really wanted to highlight this. A person who is not measuring the outcomes has no way of determining whether they're happy or not. So you say believers describe themselves as happier than, you see what I'm saying? Like, if that's an ER, like happier than what? Happier than before they were believers? And then I will rip that pony to shreds immediately, because I'll demonstrate that for the most part, there's likely not been a time of their conscious lives that they haven't been believers. That's a rare scenario for Americans. If you grew up in a house with believers, as soon as you could talk, you was already saying your little prayers, even if you wasn't saved. You wasn't saved yet, because according to certain doctrines, you couldn't be saved until you got to an age of whatever that is, age of responsibility or something. But so being a believer is not about the moment you decide to give your life to Jesus Christ. Being a believer is about the moment you believe that this story was possibly true. That's a fine line of distinction that most people don't call out. And and if you do so, you'll realize how much bullshit salvation is. Like that, then it's like you're just saving people who was already saved. Like, I don't understand this. Okay, anyway, we gotta keep going. But no, so those people, like a lot of times the things that I was using as evidence that this is working, or that I was using as evidence that this is godly, that this is powerful, that this is positive, was not actual evidence. It was actually just anecdotes, confirmation bias anecdotes. A believer who truly wants to believe, even if their life is falling apart, they're going to say things that are not true about God to protect their belief. They're going to say things about their pastor that are not true to protect their belief. They're going to say what pastor is preaching is saving my life to protect their belief, even if their life isn't getting better in any way. Even if their life is visibly falling apart, they've already taught themselves how to call a loss a win. He may not come when you want him, but he'll always be on time. That makes no fucking sense. You know? This is my journey out of the rabbit hole, man. This is my journey out of the rabbit hole. So I realized, like, oh man, I can no longer use their testimonies as evidence. And I can't even use my own, you know? And so, but if you don't understand that that's what's going on when they say these things, when they confirm these things, you'll mistake their script for evidence of impact. That's actually what kind of kept me in the faith for as long as I remained in it, because I was accepting their anecdotes as evidence that God was using me. And so even though I could not feel God, I could not see God, I could not hear God, they became almost like agents in the Matrix, you know, always there to pull me back on course with their words. And the funny thing is, the words they're giving me are the words that I've given them. And we create this feedback loop of keeping each other stuck and calling it good, you know? But you cannot trust someone's idea of good if the God they worship murders children. Because when it comes face to face, if you ask them, when God drowns the entire population, was he being good? They will struggle. Some, the honest ones, will struggle. Others will flat out say it is good. So this is how you know this. Again, I'm trying to highlight the bigger problems. If that's how you approach your theology, if that's how you approach the thing that you consider the highest paragon of goodness, then until you fix that, you're likely a threat to humans around you, because that means other people can convince you to amen atrocities because you don't actually have an internal critique and a compass that lets you determine, that lets you use the information available to determine what is right or wrong. You have to completely shortcut that process, shut it down, and determine, is God involved? And if God is involved, then no critical thinking is allowed. If God is involved, it is whatever he did is good. This is how you get the current state of the United States of America. And I say united, almost tongue in fucking cheek. All right. So, all right, we're getting. So, after being sharply reminded that the theology of specifically the Black church had made it incompetent and in many ways complicit in the problems of the community, I finally gave myself permission to measure the outcomes against the claims. And I had 2 decades worth of data and experience. The results were that people were pretending to be helped based on the priming of the propaganda, but their lives were not improving. They were not healing. Hell, they were barely growing. And the ones who did so in spite of their theology, not because of it. And this is when I gave myself permission to honor my skepticism, realizing that the inner voice that I had commissioned myself to ignore and suppress as doubt, demons, or depression was actually me trying desperately to be honest with myself about what legitimately made no sense to me. Faith was me forcing myself to ignore evidence, consequences, and cause and effect in order to support the unsubstantiated claims of God involvement. And as I was going, and the more and more I thought about it, that was something that I was not going to do anymore. That is my literal moment of deconversion, of realizing that I've been fighting me my whole life. I've literally been choking myself out. I realized so many times my skepticism could have preserved me. My skepticism could have protected me from getting involved with certain arrangements. But which I taught myself, and I taught myself, I crucified my flesh. I brought every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. That's the way that I lived. And so the biggest mind fuck that deconstruction and deconversion does to you, it's a healthy place to get to, but it's hard. It's hard because it's uncomfortable. Excuse me. It's uncomfortable. But the biggest place that I had to get to was that I did this to myself. That was, and again, it's my story. Some of you, it was beat into you. I mean, it was kind of beat into me too. But even when it was beat into me, I didn't believe it. You know, the version of me that believed it, I did that to myself. I did that by silencing my voice. I did that by elevating other people's voice over sense. I did that. I did that by elevating sensationalism over substance. I did that to myself. And so deconversion wasn't just, or deconstruction wasn't just about walking away from God. You know, it was realizing what I had done to myself and making the decision and the commitment to never do that bullshit again. To never silence your own voice. You know? Oh man. That it's okay, it's fair, and it's absolutely acceptable to admit when something doesn't make sense to you and stand on business. If you want it to make sense to me, make it make sense. Easy as that. But I will no longer force myself to believe things that don't even make sense. I'm just not doing that. You know, like I said, I was ignoring so many things in my life to protect God. I'm like, nope, done. But shit, this is where the real work starts, because now I had so much to unpack. How much had prolonged belief and behavior actually cost me? I had to deal with questions like, was it too late for me to transition into a new career? Like, what am I going to do now? And what do I do now with all of these ambitions to positively impact the world? At that time, my worldview didn't include stories of atheists changing the world. The propaganda of my worldview was that it was always religious belief that led people to do great things for humanity. Boy, was that a flat out lie. I mean, a flat out lie. As a matter of fact, so many of our movements have been led by humanists and outright atheists, which I've talked about. But one of the things that had always terrified me of caving to my critical thinking is that I thought that without the belief in God, I would no longer have any reason to want to help the world. Turns out I want to help the world because I'm selfish. And I'm okay with that. I never needed God to want to help the world. God was never the motivation. That's what I realized when I dissected my story. This is why I'm so passionate about the things that I do. Out of all of the conversations that exist in the community, you notice that I take a different approach because this is my passion. I want to change the world. And God did not give me that passion, obviously, because I don't believe in a God. And that passion predates my relationship with belief. It's a part of who I am, you know? And what actually motivates it is that I live in this world. You know, my brother, well, he's not my biological brother, but just call him brother. But he stopped by a few months ago, and we made some music together. And he came into my garage, which is where my office is, and he says, "One thing about you, you cannot leave a space unoccupied." I cannot. I cannot. He's so right, but he's seen me do it. He used to be my minister of music when I was a pastor. So he knows I will go into an empty warehouse and give me a few weeks and God damn it. But I want to change things. I want to improve things. I want to make things better. I didn't get that from God. That's me. That's my little neuro spiciness going on. There's a little egotism in that as well, and possibly a little bit of a God complex. And I am okay with all of that because what it means for me is that, Darante, what you found out, what you've discovered is that you want to do good things because you want to do good things. And damn it, that felt so liberating for me. Because again, my deepest fear was that if I left God, that I'd lose all motivation, that I'd lose all desire, that I'd lose all compassion because I had bought into the propaganda. Turns out now that I realize that me wanting to help the world is because it's what I want to do and it is a selfish motivation, it actually makes me more motivated now. And I think there's a little bit of social proof for that. So, man, this has gotten so good. I just looked at the numbers. It's so great to have so many of you in here enjoying the conversation. I love you all, and I hope this is giving you something. Okay, so I want to share a few things that I did after that moment that I thought were absolutely critical. And I did put these in a guide. I normally don't do guides for the live conversations, but I thought this one was really good. So I did put together a guide for this one. It's called Let It Burn, and it's a deconstruction guide. And that's why it's a deconstruction guide. Actually, it's more like a workbook. I got to be honest with you, but you'll find these things and so much more in the workbook. But one of the first things that I had to do after that moment of realizing, okay, it's official. I'm an atheist. God is no longer necessary with my worldview. I'm okay I'm okay with God not being involved with my worldview. Now that I've deconstructed, it's not just that I have to reconstruct my life, which I mean I do. I had the moment I absolutely had to rebuild my life. My career was gone. My family structure as I knew it was gone because I was going through a divorce. I had to figure out what the hell my life was going to look like after that. And yes, that shit is scary. Yes, it is destructive at times, but it was my doorway into liberation. So yes, on one hand, I had to rebuild my life, but on the other end, I got to rebuild my life. And that was the freedom. Because this time, when I was rebuilding my life, I wasn't running it by God. I wasn't running it by a mentor. I wasn't running it by family members. I was giving myself permission to rebuild my life in my own image. I literally became the God of my own world. Can't be the God of anybody else's world. I'd be a piss poor God in your world, I promise you. I promise you. But I damn sure became the God of my world. As in, I'm the final authority for me. I'm the final voice for me. I'm the final decision maker for me. You know? And it was funny because I was having a conversation with my mentor, Pastor Mike McClure Jr. I'll throw his name out there. My mentor at the time. And I was telling him about the things I was wrestling with. And I was like, you know what? I'm going through with the divorce. And he says, hey, I don't think God is granting you permission to divorce. And I said, oh, you misunderstood. I'm not asking God's permission. He don't live here. You know what I'm saying? That was easy for me. I wouldn't ask anybody else for permission. So why would I be asking the invisible motherfucker for permission? How much sense does that make? Like, if I'm gonna ask somebody for permission, why would I ask the invisible motherfucker who never talks? Do you see the mind fuck? Don't do that to people. Listen, if you're a believer, stop doing that shit. No, I made it clear to him that no, God was no longer a requirement in my worldview. And in that moment of becoming an atheist, for me, when I dethroned God, I also dethroned everybody else in my life who wasn't me. So that means nobody else gets to tell me what the fuck to do. Now I'll have to deal with the consequences if I do shit that don't work out right, but I'm okay because it's my fucking consequences. You know what I'm saying? It's me. It's me. So here's what I had, or I don't want to say what I had to do. This is what I got to do. I got to rebuild my life. And for those of you who are maybe in the middle of deconstruction right now, or maybe you're at the end of reconstruction, that's the thing that I want to make you most excited about, is that you get to rebuild your life in your image. Your life finally gets to be a reflection of your lived experience. Your life finally gets to be a reflection of your understandings of the world around you. Guess what? Even if they're wrong. Because what we should know as critical thinkers is that all of us are likely wrong about most things. And all of us have likely been sincerely wrong about important things before. Likely, otherwise we wouldn't be deconstructed. So what I had to do, the first thing was I got resolve on who I was. I actually wrote my first book, or published my first book. I've been writing books since I was a kid. I never felt safe to publish my work because I always thought about the judgment. I always thought about, oh, what if this reveals that my faith isn't as strong as it needs to be? Oh, what if this reveals that I like sex a little too much? Like constantly having to police myself. And so when I published my first book, the year that I deconverted, I didn't give a damn about typos, and I still don't. Y'all will find it out about me real quick. I didn't give a damn about typos. I didn't give a damn about whether other people got it or not. I didn't care if anybody was going to read it. For the first time in my life, I was doing stuff for me. So I wrote my first book because I needed to work some shit out. The name of that book started as Insignificant, because I realized that a part of what it kept me in faith was that I had no value in myself, that I had lost all sense of significance, that my identity had ultimately been completely submerged in Christ. And so now I needed to figure out who I was, And so I wrote that book to walk myself through the process. And by the time I got to the end of the book, I changed the name. It was no longer Insignificant. The name of the book was Significant. And I didn't plan that. That's really what happened in that process of writing that book. I found my sense of personal significance, and it was an intentional journey. I wrote the book almost like writing a journal, which is how I write anyway. But I got to the place where I said, no, I no longer need anybody else's permission, affirmation, or acknowledgement to exist in the world as I saw fit. That was out the window, Nope. Nope, mom, dad, fuck your opinions too. Your opinions are just as useless as God's opinions to me. Let me see that shit do something for your life first. Oh my God, I'm that type of person. Hey, here's a little advice. Never give me unsolicited advice if you're not good at it. Never give me unsolicited, especially like if we're in person. Like if you do it online, I'm just going to ignore you unless it's stupid. If it's stupid, my Nero Spicy has to call it out. It just has to. But other than that, but like if it's face to face, if you give me unsolicited advice and you're not good at it, I'm gonna eat your ass alive with a smile, just showing you how stupid that advice was and that you should get out of the business of giving advice. Don't you ever do this shit again. Don't do it. As a matter of fact, if somebody would offer to pay you, don't do it because you'd be committing fraud. That's how bad you are at it. Don't do this shit. That's me. All right. But also, you'll notice about me, I don't want to say never because that's an absolute, but I almost want to say it's true. You will, if you're not a part of my space, you will not see me giving somebody unsolicited advice. That's the weirdest thing to me in the world. I don't know why people do that, but that's also because I'm an extreme pragmatist. And so everything has to pass a test of utility for me, and though that may sound cold, it also keeps me from over inserting my opinion in other people's lives about shit that has nothing to do with me and won't benefit my life and won't benefit their life, that the only thing me saying it would do would make me feel better. That's the way I think about that. I realize, oh, damn, if the only thing this is going to do is I'm going to, there, I said it. And at that moment, that's just a childish urge, and I'm not saying childish urges are bad, but if it's going to create unnecessary tension with other people, it's not really something I have to do, you know? You know? And I'm telling you now, all my urges I can't stop. And that's why I just give some options. I'm not saying you got to be perfect with this shit. I don't know what perfect is. Please don't invite me to be at the funeral and I got to sit in the pulpit or the platform or the stage and funny shit happen in your church. Don't do that. Because those urges, oh, bro, the comedian in me is way too much a fool for me to be sitting on the stage and some funny shit break out and I don't laugh. You're going to see it all over my face. And if other people start laughing too, I'm likely going to take the microphone and make a moment. Because why not? There's the performance part. It's there. It's there. So figuring out, getting resolve on who I was realizing it was separating myself from this whole Adam and Eve superstition or anything like it, that nobody before me is a prototype for me. Nobody's a prototype for me. I'm the first of me. I think. Can't say it absolutely, but I think I'm the first of me. I think, There's such a deep philosophical question, thought experiment in that, but I'm going to try not to chase that rabbit right now. But there's no prototype for me. So nobody is going to have a better view in my life than me. Nobody, And this is often why, even when people come to me for advice, when my clients come to me for advice, I like to kind of help them course correct and say that this is why honesty is so important in these types of sessions, is because I don't have a front row seat in your life. And honestly, good advice needs a handle on the variables. It's a whole nother conversation. But I often tell people, you always have to remember you're the one with the best view. Other people can give you good information. Other people can give you good ideas, but you're the one that's in the view to determine where that good information can be used at or whether that information may not be helpful right now. And so again, as anytime y'all hear me talking about anything that is learning, we have to get people to start learning how to shift themselves from the passive seat to the active seat of learning. All right. Man, this is good, y'all. Okay, where am I at? Oh, man. AT. Oh, man, I appreciate you. That's beautiful. Oh, okay, so I was able to realize I'm a communicator. I'm a developer. I'm a leader. That's me. And I finally gave myself to be like, hey, it's okay to be you. I used to tell people, my wife and I used to teach these sessions about 3 or 4 years ago. And one of the things we'd walk people through is to do this thought experiment. And y'all have likely heard me mention it before. Do this thought experiment where you take all of you and just pour it out on the table with no judgment. And I feel for anybody who's deconstructing and who's, anybody who's deconstructing or you've already deconstructed, if you haven't done this, I encourage you to do this, because you'd be surprised how many parts of you still submit to a voice of judgment that is not yours. And so this becomes so important because there's so many different things about yourself, about your desires, about your passions, about your interests, about your hobbies. There's so many emotions and thoughts that you have about those things that are not even your thoughts. And so it's a really good idea, really good practice after deconstructing to say, okay, now let me figure out who the fuck I am. Let me get out every voice in my, do an eviction, a mass eviction of every voice in your head that is not yours or that is not wanted. Now, you might want some voices in your head that's not yours. I like a few voices in my head that's not mine. They bring a little stability to the conversation, bring a little stability. But no, but you want to do that mass eviction, man. Call it death of the fiction, right? And then pour all of yourself out on a table. You can use a mind map to do this. You can use some index cards to do this, whatever you like, man. Chess pieces, I don't care. Tape, but just start writing down the things that you like with no judgment values, no positive, false value, no positive, negative values, no judgment values. Just, I like this, I like this, I like this. And I'm gonna tell you, this is an uncomfortable thing to do. I will tell you that. If you're gonna do this exercise honestly, it's very uncomfortable, but that's why you want to do it. Because there's going to be some things on your list, if you're allowing yourself to be honest with yourself, that are going to make you be like, oh, I can't believe I wrote that down. Oh, that cringe. There's going to be some things that you likely write down that you may say, oh man, I hope nobody ever sees this. So burn that shit. I don't know. Do it on Snapchat. I don't know. But that's the important part. That's where it really matters at. The goal is after you, and only after you feel like you've emptied everything out, and that's such a subjective, measurement. I know. Just like, do you feel like you got it all out, but only after you feel like you kind of got all of it out. And the big thing here, the reason you want that part to be kind of empty is because you want your mind to be free to move to that next phase. You don't want things to still be popping up in your head. You want, if that takes 3 hours to get everything out, you want to honor that process. And honestly, the longer it takes, the more excited you're likely gonna get about it, because it's literally like looking at yourself in a mirror and just not labeling it anything, But after you do that, then you go through those things, each and every one of them, and ask yourself how you feel about them. And go as deep as you feel like you need to. And that's how you find that's one of the ways that you can hopefully kind of reintegrate into yourself. I found it to be incredibly helpful for myself, and I found it to be very incredibly helpful for people I've mentored, people I've counseled, and other things, because much of the judgment that you put on others is simply a reflection of how judgmental you are of yourself. And so if we want a world where people are really less judgmental of others, we have to create the resources for people to be able to be less judgmental of themselves. And it's only when they are less judgmental of themselves that they can rightfully and safely discern which parts of them might not be productive or helpful for whatever they want to do in humanity or for other humans. But if they don't have the safety to interrogate that, then they're not going to interrogate that. And it's just going to, now that's me. That's my, y'all know me. I'm always going to kind of take that sociological tip, but that's my passion. So I got some resolve on who I was. But the second thing, and this is going to be a big one, I got clear about my responsibility. This was probably the most pivotal. Is that like pivot and pitiful together? I don't know. But anyway, it was probably the most pivotal moment of my life. I shifted very quickly within the first year of my deconversion from they lied to me to I believed bullshit. That was a very important shift for me. Very pivotal. First few months, I'm like, damn, everybody just lying. Grandma lied. Mama and them lied. Uncle James lied. Everybody liars. You know. But I do have a little bit more nuance. And so I realized, like, yeah. And I mean, some of them lying. Like, there is some lying going on. For damn sure. There is some lying going on. But then there's also just some parroting going on. There's also just some propaganda going on. And as long as we live in a world where we don't hold ourselves accountable to verify information, that's going to continue to happen, you know? And so I realized, like, recognizing that people lied to me or recognizing that people gave me information that wasn't accurate, that's not necessarily a flex. Not for me, not the way that I approach life. It's just not a flex. That's going to keep me in a position of being victimized. So I needed to make that next step. I needed to make that next step to realize, yes, Darante, some people lied to you, but there is a bigger problem here because you can't stop people from lying to you. You know, there's nothing. You at least I don't think so. Maybe that world will come, but I don't think there's a world where you can say, hey, if you lying, you got to tell me. You know? So I realized a greater flex was to realize, like, oh no, I believed bullshit. And I believed a lot of bullshit. That's what I need to fix. It's my responsibility to verify information. And I had the tools to do so since at least middle school. You know? But I will say, when you rob people of their right to question, you deprive them of the act of responsibility. So I spent the next several years unpacking as many superstitions as I could. I was unpacking superstitions about my health. This is how I go from 580 to under 200 pounds. I was unpacking superstitions about my career, about my finances, about entertainment, what I enjoyed, about my politics, and even about others. I was unpacking my superstition about others, realizing that even having these strong opinions about other people could be based in superstition, realizing that other people don't actually owe me their existence. And so why do I have opinions on what clothes they wear, how tight they are, whether they wear weave or natural hair, whether they have glasses or contacts? Why the fuck do I have all of these opinions about other people's lives that will in no way impact my life, help my life, or do anything? So I don't not do it just because it's wrong. I don't do it because it's useless. It's pointless. Literally. It does nothing for my life. And then I realize, like, holy shit, that's what superstition does. It becomes an abstraction of truth. Get you in a place where you're out here fighting over bullshit, creating harm over bullshit, because you don't know any better. You don't even know any better. You think having this opinion is somehow helping you sleep at night, and it is not. You know, this is why, you'll typically have a hard time pulling me in conversations about people. I don't really discuss people. It's just useless to me. I prefer a different strategy. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm not going to tell you what it is. because there's COINTELPRO shit out here going on. That's the stuff that I have to think about. All right. Next thing, I got honest about my ambitions. This one was a hard one for me. And I think this is one, I think there are many people who've deconstructed who likely have not done this part yet, is to get honest about their ambitions in life. Again, I think that's where, as far as Christianity, as I've seen it in the US and in Africa, what Christian theology does to human ambition needs to be considered a crime against humanity. Christian doctrine needs to be considered when we look at what it does, the way it makes people feel about their desire to do or their desire to be, what it does to people there. That shit needs to be considered a crime against humanity, because we have whole neighborhoods that have fucking fallen apart because people were afraid of their own ambition. I gave myself permission to start saying the quiet part out loud. I wanted to do something historic with my life and had since I was a kid. But I had spent 2 decades shrinking myself to fit into other people's boxes, ignoring my own ambitions to honor their sensibilities about humility. That was a light bulb for me. That other people didn't have to get it. Other people didn't have to want me to have it. The fact that it was important to me was all that fucking mattered. That's how my ambitions work. They're my ambitions. So when someone says, I think you want too much, I say, that's why you not me. And you should probably spend less time thinking about my wants and more time about yours. Nope. Other people don't have to get it. I don't need you to get my ambition. I need you to get your ambition. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Yep. That's good, ain't it? That's good. I gave myself permission to be honest about my ambitions. And when I say that, I'm not just talking to the people who have grandiose visions of, whatever. I'm also talking to people who feel constantly judged because maybe you don't have grand ambitions. Maybe your ambitions, which I think that's a false way to say it anyway, but that's how people feel. And say, oh, my ambition isn't as big as yours. Why would you even measure your ambition to somebody else's ambition? It's for you. It's to fulfill you. It's for your life. Their ambition is for their life. There's some people, their ambition is just to be able to, peacefully live somewhere near a lake where they can fish every now and then and be nice to the people around them and help out by sharing, knickknacks and helping people with the cars or whatnot and just being helpful. Nobody has the right to minimize your ambition. It's yours. It's yours. But you have to give yourself permission to be honest about it. You have to give yourself permission to be able to say, I think I'm gonna need a little bit more than that. Or you have to give yourself permission to be able to say, that's a little too much for me. And recognize that these are not right or wrong answers. These are not good or bad answers. I actually try not to use the word good when I'm trying to figure out whether or not I should do something. I don't ask myself, is this a good thing to do? I ask myself, will this be beneficial? And then I attach some types of measurements that I'm looking for the benefits for. So will it be beneficial to me? Will it be beneficial if there's another person involved to the other person involved? What are the long-term benefits? That's how I define good in my life now, because I realized a long time ago that the word good was not helpful for me. because I was making a lot of good decisions, or decisions that I thought was good, even decisions that other people thought were good. If I tell you some of those decisions, you would even say those decisions sound like good decisions, because that's how subjective good is. So I needed a deeper question. Is it beneficial? You know what I'm saying? Okay. So, but I realized the fact that it was important to me was really all that mattered. And so they're my ambitions because they're mine. When I was a kid, I felt like I always had to hide my ambitions because somebody was gonna say, "Oh, you arrogant, you doing too much, you want too much, you this, you that." That's, the devil was pride. Pride comes before the fall, son. Take heed lest you fall. Deal with all that bullshit. Be humble, and you coach yourself out of becoming a fucking world changer. And so, for all of those potential world changers that coached yourself out of it, I'm here to coach your ass back in the game, because we need you out here. We need you. We need you. Hell, almost gonna make me cry. All right, but that's it. For your ambition, the only thing that matters is that it's important to you. And if it's important to you, you've gotten something powerful. So once I've gotten to this place, it meant that I was no longer waiting on people to pick me, nor was I no longer waiting on people to praise me, nor was I any longer waiting for people to pay me. I became enough in my own sight. So if it matters to me, damn it, that's enough. That was incredibly liberating for me. I also started prioritizing growth over goals. Now, goals are extremely important to me, but growth is paramount. I stopped doing 5-year plans. Remember everybody was doing their 5-year plans back in the day? I stopped doing the 5-year plans, and I just started focusing on my life as a whole project. So it stopped being about where do I want to be in 5 years, and became about what do I want to have done with my life when the lights go out. So the big reason I separated from goals was, for a while, because I realized that I was still approaching goals from a very superstitious place. In other words, like I was just picking something and hoping to hit it without really understanding the processes, techniques, or the practices needed to move the needle. So setting the goals in those early days still felt a lot like just trying to predict or prophesy. And I didn't want a prediction. I wanted a process. And so growth became my process. So now my goals are about where do I want to grow? And my growth is about what do I want to do? And so if what I want to do is change the world, then I want to grow in the areas that'll help me do that. And thus, that defines my goals. So if this conversation hits something in you, good. I'm hoping it helps people realize that you don't need a pulpit to have power. You don't need anybody else's permission to exist fully and authentically and honestly. And you sure as hell don't need a belief in a God to be deeply, relentlessly committed to growth, justice, and impact. I didn't just lose everything. I let it burn so I could start building what was mine. That's the powerful part. I let it burn. I let it all burn. Look, I'm a little extreme with it. I let it all burn. Family, friends, let it all go. If you don't want to be with me, it's okay, because I'm letting it burn. I'm so tempted to sing it right now, but I think it's the remix that's playing in my. It's getting hard for me to say this. It's coming from my. I'm not about to try to sing Usher. Usher was all the way up there. You remember that? And all the men were trying to sing high for a long time, and that made me have to always sing high with this deep ass voice, which means I was straining the fuck out of my vocal cords. I was good at it, but straining the fuck out of my vocal cords to hit those notes, not realizing that deep and sexy is dark and lovely too. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, sorry, didn't mean to do that. But I want to encourage everyone who's been a part of this conversation, and I am going to jump in the chat a little bit in a few, and then y'all are going to have to pick at me, looking all trying to get into it. But I want to encourage people to get honest with yourself, get clear, and get to work. And if you're walking that same tightrope between losing and becoming, I'm right here. We're building this new thing together, because freedom, it's not a reward. It's a responsibility. I used to always tell people, for those of you who do not know, you're going to hear it. Well, you're going to hear it. I say it all the time. It's not something I hide. But I was a Black nationalist. That is a part of who I was. And one of the things that I would communicate to people quite frequently is that freedom is not a place to escape to. It is a hill to die on, you know? And so that trauma sometimes that we feel after deconstruction, that trauma is almost like the trauma of being born, you know? Dare I say, born again. Because what you're feeling is the discomfort of having to see the world with your own eyes for the very first time, and then having to figure out how to navigate that shit. That's a lot of work. And it's not always easy, you know? I hope y'all have enjoyed this conversation. Let me see if I can see these chats, which means I'm going to pull this over here. So y'all are going to be looking at the side of my face so I can see. Beautiful, beautiful. Oh, man, I didn't even see we had super chats coming in. Let's see here. We got new members, $1.49 super sticker. We got 3 new members. That's beautiful. $2 super chat. My doctor told me to lay off anything utilitarian. That's funny. That is so hilarious. Lee, $5 super sticker. Thank you so much. Y'all are absolutely amazing. I haven't been doing lives as much as I used to, but I'm getting back in the flow, and just kind of getting getting some freedom in my schedule, y'all, has just been amazing. So I get more time to just say, hey, you know what? I'm having some thoughts. I think I want to share them with the community. I think this may be helpful. And then today, when I was doing it, because I've basically built me a nice little working engine now where I can get my content out faster, and get stuff done quicker. So I was also able to build a work study guide for this conversation today too, which I wasn't planning on doing, but I figured, like, man, after I pulled my notes together, I was like, no, this is like too good. Somebody is going to find some value in this as a work study guide, in a way to find ways to work through their own deconstruction and reconstruction to rebuild a life that truly represents who they feel like they are. Man. Oh, man. That is awesome, Muttley. It's great to see so many of you all in here. Oh, man, Oceanus. I've not seen you in a while. Oceanus. Now I want to make a joke about Oceanus, but I'm going to leave it alone. I see Define Naughty. I think I might have missed that part of the conversation. Man, y'all have been busy today. I absolutely love that. I think we have one of the greatest communities out here, and I'm not just saying that. I love some of the conversations I see. As y'all know, as a part of my sabbatical, I kind of pulled away from the Discord. I jump in there every now and then. I don't. This week, I haven't had a chance to be in there at all, other than do a little bit of, loves here. But seeing people in the Discord, building conversations with each other, and navigating has been absolutely amazing just to watch. So if you're looking for a place to get connected with other people and build with them, have some conversations and build a little bit of community, little bit by little, Discord is an excellent place. If you like what we're doing from the Bridge City Global aspect, then we do have a course that you can take called Bridge City 101, How We Change the World. It is absolutely free, and it's not a bunch of assignments. It's a forum-based course, which means we give you some information about Bridge City Global, and then you get to talk about it with other people in the course. And those who graduate from the course, they get put into another course called the Alumni Study Hall, which is actually not a course at all. it's just a study hall hangout place where they can ask specific questions, talk to each other about anything, work on projects together. One of the things we do in there now is for Sunday sessions. We give our graduates an opportunity to ask any questions before that Sunday session, so we can include them in the conversation. So for those of you who are interested connecting there, you have that avenue. Also, all of this is DLDD World Group. That's the big umbrella of everything that we do. So there's so much more under there. There's Mastermind, there's Windows Shop, there's Omniverse, which we'll probably be launching that closer to next year. But there's so much we're working on. And so if you're a type of person who's looking for something to work on, I'd say stay connected, join our email list, keep watching what we're doing, and look for ways for how you can help and just start helping. But other than that, man, I think that's all I have for y'all. I got to figure out how I'm going to shut this show out today. Man. Oh, yes. It's definitely cathartic to do that and also take ownership of your growth. Absolutely. Absolutely. Man, y'all are beautiful. So that's the hard part. That's one of the reasons I don't like getting into the chats, because then when I do, I don't want to get out, because like I really want to spend the rest of my time scrolling up through all of these chats. But what it does my heart good to know that you all get value out of each other too, because that's one thing that scares me. You know, as a former pastor, is something I'm very cautious of, is that I don't want a situation where people mistake my presence or people inflate my value because of my presence. And I'm like, no, what I'm saying is valuable because I'm human. And so the other humans who are in the chat are just as valuable, and you actually get to have more back and forth with them. So I do get to sometimes rest in that space of realizing that, man, it's actually beautiful, even when it's aggravating for me that I can't get in the conversation the way that I want to. It's beautiful to know that these conversations are happening and that we're creating space for them. And so I'd encourage you to please never take it for granted. And for those of you who are chat warriors, who are constantly engaging others in these conversations, many of you can attest to how valuable it's been for you to flesh out some of your ideas with other people in the chat while bouncing off the conversation. And honestly, that's a model that I really want to teach and train people on how to do, especially as we get more into Bridge City Global stuff and Mastermind. All right. But that is all I have for y'all, man. I'm going to close us out. I'm going to pick some music to play for us. But as always, I do remind you, for those of you who are looking for links, we do have them in the description, but then we also have them on our outro for our live shows. So if you're looking for different ways to get involved and you need something, or you want to buy something, or you want to support something, or you want to just know where a website is, always check out that outro. It'll get you right where you need to be. That's all I have, y'all. Until next time, keep rising.